Always seeking solutions, never sowing division. It's Brian Kilmeade.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us on the Brian Kilmeade Show. You'll recognize the voice is not Brian Kilmeade, but he is going to be back tomorrow. I'm Jason Chaffetz, filling in for Brian. I really do appreciate him letting me do this. I love it when they ask me, and it's a lot of fun because they always get these great, amazing guests and lots of fun stuff to talk about. There's always somebody doing something stupid somewhere, and there's always a lot of news happening. And this bright and early Monday, I should say, things are happening. So thanks for joining us. Joining us right now is Michael Goodwin. He's a regular on the show, New York Post columnist, one of the best. You can find him on X at @mgoodwin_New York or NY Post. He's got a new article out. Trump, Israel have Iran shaking in their boots. Iran leaders shaking in their boots. Michael Goodwin, thanks so much for joining us. I really do appreciate it.
My pleasure, Jason. Thank you.
So tell me about this article. What prompted you to write about it?
Well, I think of course, the meeting on Saturday was coming up between America and Iran, the first direct talks in some years. Iran, of course, insisted they be indirect, meaning a mediator. Stupid. The way they wanted to do it. But in the end, the American delegation, Witkoff, representing the United States, and the Iranian foreign minister did meet face-to-face and agreed to continue the conversation in a week or so. But I think what's really significant about it, Jason, is President Trump's position going in, which is, as I write in the column exclusively, that the United States is telling Iran, either you destroy your nuclear facilities or we will destroy them. And the significance, of course, is that means there's no deal where there are inspections and all of that stuff that happened under the Obama deal that Biden tried to revive and thankfully didn't happen. Trump had killed it in 2016 by withdrawing from it. And I think it really turns the page on history in a lot of ways, that neither the European Union nor the United Nations nor anybody else was going to confront Iran in this way. And I think from President Trump's perspective, he tore up that initial agreement. He reimposed sanctions on Iran in his first term. He used the attack on Soleimani, the head of the Iranian terror network, to take him out. So he is really approaching it from a different perspective than really any other recent leader in the United States or anywhere else other than Israel, which is that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. And if they don't agree, then we will do it ourselves. We will make sure. That's going to be a very tough pill for Iran to swallow. But I have to say, I think that right now, Iran, we have two factors here. One is Donald Trump is really at the height of his political power and strength, and Iran is really at one of its low points. It has lost large chunks of Hamas and Hezbollah. The Houthis, its other terror proxy, is getting smashed to smithereens by American bunker buster bombs in Yemen. The fall of Assad in Syria was a setback. Yeah. And Iran's economy is at a low. And they're having trouble with electricity. They can't even provide electricity. They're having trouble with water. Their currency is collapsing. So these are, and of course, Israel, by taking out Hezbollah and Hamas the way it has, and it stripped Iran of its much of its air defense system. So Iran is kind of a sitting duck right now. It's very weak. And according to an interesting New York Times report over the weekend, the Ayatollah has been told that if you don't meet with Trump, the United States is going to bomb us, and we could very well, the regime could be toppled. So I think this is an incredibly important moment when you've got these two forces coming together, and one of them so weak that Trump is likely to, I think, more likely to get an agreement than he would at any other time. Now, nobody wants to see a war. It would be great if Iran would destroy its nuclear facilities. But I think his threat and his strength is having an impact already.
No, I think you're absolutely right because, look, Iran has tried to do everything it could to put their finger on the side of Hamas, Hezbollah, you're right, the Houthis, and that hasn't gone well. I remember when Iran tried to attack Israel by sending all those missiles over, and they were all pretty much rebuffed, and that could not bode well for them. And also, the thing I would add to that, you talked about the Iranian economy. Look, Donald Trump is, again, I think taking the forefront of saying, drill, baby, drill, and making sure that we're energy independent. And when you do that, when you unleash the energy prowess of the United States, it drives down the cost of oil. You drive that down, and both Russia and Iran starts to affect them because they start to lose money with their energy production.
Yes, it really hits them in the one source of international funds that they can count on. So that's why I think this is perhaps a unique moment in ever since the Iranian Revolution of 1979 and the American hostages and all of that. And so I think that this is a crucial time, and I think that by taking the strong approach that we're not going to compromise here. This is not going to be like 2015 with Obama. It's not going to be like any other time. This is different now, and Iran has to recognize that. And so, I mean, even, for example, Foreign Policy magazine has a piece suggesting that the regime could fall. And I mentioned the New York Times talking about that Khamenei has been told that the regime could fall. I mean, we have not heard this kind of talk for a very long time. So that's why I'm optimistic that something good is going to happen here. It would be nice if it didn't take American military action, but I suspect Iran is not going to voluntarily give up its nuclear program because it's invested so much in it. It's identified so much of it as proof of its supremacy in the region. It has caused all kinds of ramifications throughout the Mideast. So I would hope that they would come to their senses and recognize that Trump means business, but there's no way to predict that they will do that with any confidence.
Look, peace through strength has its abilities, right? And Donald Trump personifies that. It's much like Ronald Reagan. I think people knew those two presidents meant business, and what they said was foreshadowing what they're actually going to do. So rather than the approach of appeasement that Joe Biden took by selling, and Obama, by sending him pallets full of cash, yes, that suddenly we're going to say, no, you can't do that. If you want to be a responsible person, a responsible country, I should say, on this planet, then you're going to have to play by some rules of decency. And I don't think that's too much to ask. And I think the left, at least the Democrats here in the United States, would do well to find something they could find with the Trump administration to agree on. And it would make our country safer if they also would join in concurrence. Because what's the alternative? We've tried the alternative and it didn't work. And the world's less safe because of it. So I don't know. That's probably me wishing for too much, right?
Well, look, I do go back to the fact that this is something very different. We haven't seen this. Obama and Biden tried, the sweet talk, the incentives, right, to have inspections of the nuclear facilities, etc. It didn't work, and they used the money, much of the money, they used it to fund terrorism. So, as I say in the column, Henry Kissinger asked back around 2006 or so, almost 20 years ago, Iran has to decide whether it's a country or a cause. And I think if we look back over the last 2 decades, we would say they've made that decision. They're a cause. They're not a normal country. They suppress their own people at home to create this adventurism, military aggression abroad, all about subjugating their neighborhood and eliminating Israel and the United States. Remember, Israel's the little Satan. We're the great Satan.
Yeah.
And so Israel was for them a speed bump on their way to conquering America. I mean, this sounds crazy, but that's what their leadership believes and teaches and insists is their policy. And so if we can end that, I think there are all kinds of benefits that flow throughout the region, to the Lebanese people, for example, to even the Palestinians, because Hamas would have no sugar daddy. So I think that there are all kinds of benefits that flow from this, which is why I think President Trump has approached it this way, like this is the end. And don't forget, they tried to assassinate Trump. They have contracts supposedly on Mike Pompeo, and others from the president, John Bolton, from the president's first term because of the Soleimani strike. So this is a bad country. These are bad people, and the sooner we can remove them from power one way or another. The ideal way would be the people of Iran themselves would rise up and remove them from power. But we may be getting there because, according to these other accounts, the regime is really in a very weak and dangerous spot.
Yeah. All right, Michael Goodwin, I got one more question for you. Hopefully you've seen this. It's the picture of Gretchen Whitmer, the governor of Michigan, attending an Oval Office event, but then holding up I don't know what it is, some piece of paper or some folder in front of her face as if we can't see her. Oh, it's as somebody else pointed out, it's like your 2-year-old, oh, peekaboo. Oh, I can't see you. Where is she? I wonder who that is.
I can't see you. You can't see me.
You're in the Oval Office. If you don't want to have your picture taken, don't go into the Oval Office. But it was so immature. What's your take on this?
Well, I think that, of course, yes, it was immature and silly. But I also think there's a darker message, which is like, what is she afraid of? She is afraid that Democrats will not approve of her doing business with the President of the United States. You've got to resist.
Yeah.
And if you don't resist, you're a turncoat. And what, we're going to bomb your house? What are we going to do? There's just something sick still happening in the far left of the Democratic Party that a governor is afraid to be seen with the president. This is insane. She was there to get help, and he was offering the help. They were talking about the invasive species in Lake Michigan. Other kinds of things. The President of the United States is helping. He's invited you to the White House to talk about these things, and you're afraid to be seen with him because the nut jobs on the left of your party will primary you or something?
You're there to represent.
It really has reached a stupid stage for the Democrats.
Well, like I like to say, there's always somebody doing something stupid somewhere, and she personifies that today as our leading candidate. Michael Goodwin, New York Post columnist, thank you so much for joining us on the Brian Kilmeade Show. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
From his mouth to your ears, it's Brian Kilmeade.
Almost, Brian. Hey, this is Jason Chaffetz. I'm filling in for Brian. Brian will be back tomorrow, but thanks for joining us. We've got one of my favorite people, at least one of my favorite attorneys. I heard this great attorney joke when I was much younger. Rex Lee, who's the former Solicitor General he was the Solicitor General for Ronald Reagan. He also happened to be the president of Brigham Young University, BYU, when I was a place kicker once upon a time, like back in the late 1980s. He was the president, and he would come in, and he needed a place to put his coat during the games. And so he and I became friendly, and he'd hang his stuff. Now, I was a place kicker, right? I wasn't exactly dirty and sweaty and everything else. And so, we got to become friends and everything. And then he also, by the way, happens to be the father of, little trivia, Mike Lee, Senator Mike Lee, who is like a spitting image of his dad, the inflections, the voice, and everything. So little tie in there with Senator Mike Lee from Utah, his dad, Rex Lee. And I remember him speaking once at some event in Salt Lake City. And he stood up and he said, I think it's so wrong, just fundamentally wrong that an entire class of people, a whole profession, is tainted just because of, 3 or 400,000 bad apples. And I've always appreciated that. I had it back in my mind. But one of the good apples out there is a guy named Jonathan Turley. He's joining us today. He is the J.B. and Maurice C. Shapiro Professor of Public Interest Law at George Washington University Law School and author of The Indispensable Right, Free Speech in an Age of Rage. Great book there. And he's also written an article. The guy's always writing, but he's also almost always right. And thank you for joining us today. Jonathan Turley's on the line with us.
Thank you, Jason. What a wind-up.
Yes. Now you can't mess it up from there after that's, when I was in Congress, I was faking being an attorney. I was the token non-attorney on the House Judiciary Committee. I loved it. It was like one of my favorite things. But it drove, John Ratcliffe and particularly Trey Gowdy nuts that I would be on that committee asking these probing questions. And he turned to me and said, "You have no idea what you're talking about." And I said, "That's exactly why I'm on this. That's exactly why I'm on this committee. I'm here to decipher it for the rest of America, because you shouldn't have to be an attorney to understand the laws of our country, right?" And we had a lot of back. But you testified multiple times, and we did have a lot of fun with it. And you were exceptional in your ability to synthesize something down. So let's jump in. I want to talk about your article here, right? This one's Biden's administration may have suppressed COVID evidence contradicting Chinese claims. That's kind of a big issue.
It is a very big issue, and it is an astonishing disconnect. We had over 1 million people in this country die from COVID. Millions of Americans lost their loved ones. For them, this is not some academic question. They would like to know who killed their loved ones. And there are over 7 million people and 7 million people dead, and over hundreds of millions that were laid low and sickened by this around the world. They also don't view this as some academic exercise. And yet every time experts or researchers came close to the Wuhan lab, they were set upon by this flash mob in academia and the media, calling them racist and really cutting off any debate. Well, now it turns out that we've had a couple of reports come out from the Congress in the last couple months that were suppressed by the Biden administration. One was the work of some experts in the administration that concluded that the lab theory was the most credible. Now, we know now that agencies like the Energy Department, the FBI, CIA, had come to that same conclusion. So when all these scientists were being blackballed, targeted, censored, fired for raising this, the Biden administration didn't say a word that actually federal agencies were coming to the same conclusion. But then most recently, on the defense side, a really odd report popped up. And the reason it attracted a lot of attention is because it's 2025, but the report was from 2022.
Right.
And the report said that the U.S. personnel that went to the Wuhan Games, as they were called, in 2019, not all of them, but many of them came down with what appears now to be COVID. Now, the reason that's important is because Congress had been pressing the Biden administration for years, saying, we heard that other countries, France, Germany, Their military personnel came back from Wuhan and were also struck down by what appeared to be a mysterious virus. Now, the reason this is important is for three reasons. One, it blows away the narrative of the Chinese government, because it could be months before the supposed release from the wet market. Two, it suggests that COVID was not just released, but raging in Wuhan. There was one participant who said the place looked like a ghost town. And then three, it would mean that the Chinese government knew there was a virus out there that was transmitted to humans and did not tell anyone for months. So we lost those months, and millions may have died because of it. So what did the Biden administration do? Apparently they withheld the report, and others denied that there was evidence that U.S. military personnel had contracted COVID.
Yeah, I remember President Trump getting excoriated because he was going to shut down travel from China. And you're right, but this is the nature of science, right? It's an imperfect, it's imperfect. And so you've got to be able to have a discussion and ask questions. And I also remember Senator Tom Cotton, trying to put an op-ed in the New York Times only to have it rebuffed. And it was amazing what we went through and how, in the name of science, everything like our First Amendment rights were so suppressed.
Yeah, and the troubling thing for me is in my book, The Indispensable Right, there's a section of it on COVID and academia. And what it talks about is that COVID is the best example of the cost of censorship, because what happened is that the Biden administration worked with the social media companies to censor anyone raising the lab theory. The New York Times and others called it a racist theory. And so these experts were very credible, were stomped down. Some of them were fired. They were all marginalized. Some of them were signatories to the so-called Great Barrington letter. And so we never had that debate, and we never had the debate about the 6-foot rule, the efficacy of masks, the efficacy of natural immunities. None of that debate occurred because of the censorship that was imposed in this alliance of academia, the government, media, and corporations.
Yeah, it bothered me to no end, Dr. Fauci, his approach. I think this is my take on it. I don't know that you've written about this, but I read a book when I was, Trey Gowdy would jump in and say, okay, that's breaking news. I read a book, but I read a book when I had just gotten out of college. It's called It's Not the Big That Eat the Small, It's the Fast That Eat the Slow. That's the name of this business book. And what it talks about is the need for turnover. You can't allow somebody to sit so long in one particular seat that if you do, you're new, you're innovative, you look at things differently, but then after a few years, you start to defend the fort and you stop asking probing questions and you spend the rest of your time defending the decisions that you made earlier. And when I saw, you learned that Dr. Fauci was in this essentially the same role for like 40 plus years, then you get this mentality that just, nothing can be wrong from him. And that permeates throughout the department and the agency.
Oh, I think that's right. And I've not been one of those that have trashed Fauci. My son's in med school. He just attended a class with Fauci and was impressed. But my criticism of Fauci, I've got a number of them, but my biggest one, and I say this in The Indispensable Right, is that Fauci, my problem with him is that while all of these scientists were getting hammered and fired and abused publicly for even talking about the lab theory or questioning the need to shut down all businesses and schools, Fauci remained absolutely quiet. And he knew that lab theory was a credible theory. He knew that there were questions being raised about the need to shut down, and he knew that there was no science backing up the 6-foot rule or the use of those blue surgical masks, which were largely ineffective. He knew all of that. Now, my problem with him is not just he didn't stand up and say, hey, we should study this more. My problem is that he watched other scientists across the country destroyed when he could have gone on the air just once and said, wait, hold it. These people are saying something here that is really credible, and we should have that debate. So my problem with him is his silence, because these scientists lost a lot. I spoke at the University of Chicago when the book first came out, and in the front were a lot of these signatories from the Great Barrington Declaration. And I went up to them and said, because many of them have now been vindicated, and I asked, how many of you have been restored to your associations or rehired? Not one. Some of them were not fired, and they were able to sort of stay on faculties. But they all continued to be shunned. I mean, that's the amazing thing is they've been vindicated, right? I mean, even if you disagree with the lab theory, it's now viewed as if not more credible than the natural theory. And so they've been vindicated in what they wrote, but they're still being shunned because they broke from the herd.
Well, and that's what's scary, because when you have an emerging threat, you want to be able to ask questions. You know, I think particularly in the area of science, they haven't totally figured it out yet. And those that spewed some things, like I remember some saying, "Oh, if you take the, you take the vaccine, then it's dead. You can't pass it to anybody else." Well, that wasn't true either. Look, I don't want to belabor just COVID. Let's talk about some other free speech. And I really wanted to ask you about Columbia. What's going on there? Where are students' right in terms of free speech? I mean, we have the right to peacefully assemble. There's nothing more American than protesting your government, but to do so peacefully. Yet the suppression and the what I consider terrorist type activities to try to go after, in this case, Jews because they're Jewish, it just steps over the line. And I'm surprised there haven't been more arrests.
Yeah, it was very interesting to see what happened in the Khalil case, because I was quite frankly disturbed when the administration made a pivot, because originally they said, we're deporting him for his conduct. We're deporting him because he played a role in that protest that took over the Hamilton building and trashed it. And I wrote a piece saying, look, I'm one of the biggest voices for free speech, but if they have evidence that he helped coordinate that protest, that he furthered those crimes from being committed, then the night is over, because that's conduct, not speech. Right. And he can obviously be deported. The administration made an interesting switch right at the end, where they said it doesn't matter, because we can actually deport him for anything, the stuff that would otherwise be lawful, if we still think that it's not good for the national security. And they said that basically indicated that includes their viewpoint. At first, I couldn't understand why they were doing that, and I still wish they had not done it, because it makes me feel uncomfortable in terms of free speech. I think they should have focused on where they began, but I think it was a tactical move. They saw Khalil's case as the strongest case that they had going forward, and they have a lot more cases. So they decided to take the 3-point shot. They wanted to try to get the court to say, yeah, even if this is based on what he was saying in the protest, you can still deport him. And they sunk that shot. And I think that was their intention.
No, I think it clearly was, because we are testing the bounds of who can be deported and for what. Can you simply be deported if you're, not being a good visitor here on a visa? And how we define that, I think, is an interesting question. But certainly, if you are trying and acting and trying to suppress somebody's civil rights, I think these people should be prosecuted. I mean, I just can't imagine that they don't do that more often.
Well, I think that they can in terms of the conduct. That's what I've stressed. I would prefer that to be the basis. I did have concerns over the argument involving content of speech, because you are allowed in this country to protest in favor of Palestine. And
Sure.
We don't want to convey the idea that we are deporting people because we don't like their views. Now, on campus, I saw these attacks.
Well, let me ask you this, Professor, because we're running out of time. It's one thing to advocate for Palestine, but what if you advocate for Hamas, a designated terrorist organization?
Yeah, the only question I have with that is the ambiguity of what constitutes advocating for Hamas, because now we get into, you don't want, the free speech lives only with bright lines, right? You need bright lines because you can't chill the speech of people not knowing what they can or cannot speak about. And so like many people in the free speech community, I don't like ambiguous rules. That's why we prefer to focus on conduct. And there's plenty of conduct here. There's a real reason why.
Advocating for a terrorist organization. Does that step over the line? I've got like 20 seconds.
No, advocating for a terrorist organization directly would step over the line. There's no question about that. It's just what constitutes advocacy and defining that term.
Jonathan Turley, you're the best. Really, truly do. I really, truly do appreciate it. We really do appreciate it. Stay with us. We'll be back with more on the Brian Kilmeade Show.
The more you listen, the more you'll know. It's Brian Kilmeade.
Hey, this is Jason Chaffetz filling in for Brian. Brian's not here today, working as hard as ever. He'll be back tomorrow. So I'm thrilled to be filling in for Brian. Lots happening. I always like to say there's always somebody doing something stupid somewhere. We're going to start with that, but we're going to do it with a friend, a colleague, and somebody who's one of the smarter people in the world, and that's Liz Peek, Fox News contributor, columnist for foxnews.com and The Hill. You can find her at Liz Peek if you go to X. She's got a couple new articles out and about. We're going to talk about those. But I want to start, Liz, with Governor Whitmer in the White House, in the Oval Office, making a show of things by putting that little binder up in front of her face as if, we couldn't see her, Liz.
And really, what a ridiculous situation this was. Look, Governor Whitmer was legitimately in the Oval Office to ask Trump for help because some people in Michigan had been hurt by an ice storm. This is what governors do. Whether you're a Democrat or Republican, you petition the White House for help when you need it. But for her, because she has presidential aspirations, this was mortifying. And she did not want to be photographed in the Oval Office with President Trump. But what's worse? Being photographed with the president, yes, I get that could be a difficult thing for your woke liberal followers, or showing up with this folder in front of your face, which just, she is being mocked so widely on social media, and rightly so. I mean, as one person said, it's like my 2-year-old, pretending you can't see them because they have their hand in front of their eyes. No, it doesn't work that way.
Well,
it was really sad, I thought.
Like all good stupid moves, then you try to come back and cover it up. We have some new sound of the Governor Whitmer trying to explain what she was doing. Let's listen to this, and then I want to get your reaction.
My presence was not an endorsement of any of the actions he took or the comments that were made. I wanted to be very clear about that. I was going in for a meeting, and they walked me into a press conference. I stayed in the room because I needed to make the case for Michigan, and that's my job.
All right, so they just walked me in. I don't know where I'm going. I've never been to the Oval Office. They just walked me in. What did I know? And fortunately, I had this binder that I could put up in front of my face so there would be no photos. But you're right. It's now it's such a meme. It's just unbelievable.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, it's sort of, anyway, look, I was just one of these sort of dumb moments. I don't think she is a particularly bright person, to be honest. I say that with all due respect. She's a governor of a great state, but this is not her first sort of idiotic move. I'm sure it won't be her last. But, you could be pretty sure that if she wants to run for president, these pictures are going to be held up pretty darn often, as she avoids the press. Ha ha, not really.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, my goodness. All right, let's talk about some of these articles you got. First one I want to talk about is the one that says Trump and Xi go mano a mano on tariffs. Who will back down first? What's your take on where we're at today?
Well, look, this is a really important issue, and President Trump has been talking, to his credit, about China and their illicit activities, their breaking trade rules left and right for decades. And finally, someone has had the temerity to stand up to China. And Boy, taking on President Xi is no mean thing because he's a tough guy, too. But he has no cards here. I mean, everyone has written about the greater impact on his economy from in kind of cutting back exports than it has on our economy. Obviously, that's very, very true. China is still an export-driven economy because they've been utterly unable to get Chinese consumers to step up spending. So they can't rely on a vibrant consumer, as the United States does, to grow their economy. It's all about exports. I think the fact that Xi is going to visit Vietnam, Cambodia, other countries right now, I would interpret that as trying to shore up relations with countries that, frankly, also are more worried about the United States than they are about China. He's going to try and browbeat Vietnam, for example, into not acquiescing to American demands for lower tariffs. And I don't think he'll be successful because Vietnam, which, if you remember, came right out of the gate saying zero tariffs, we'll go to zero tariffs. They have been guilty of providing China with transshipping activity. In other words, China, to avoid tariffs, to avoid bad publicity, has been shipping stuff 99% made to Vietnam. Vietnam does 1% of the manufacturing process, and then it's made in Vietnam, which circumvents a lot of trade restrictions, not just from the United States, but other countries too. I don't think that'll work. I think Xi is on his back foot here. He's scared that his total dominance, he took over running the economy several years ago, and he's made a total hash of it. So he's in trouble, and Trump is taking advantage of that to push him very hard, and I think rightly so.
Yeah, it's about time that we do this. And, you're right. Yeah. Donald Trump has talked about this for decades. This is not some new flash in the pan. He has been talking about this for a long period of time, and we're in a position of strength, and the president has a mandate. I like to say that China needs the United States, but the United States doesn't have to have China. And we do have the upper hand here. And I also, as you pointed out, I don't think it's any coincidence, though. I think it may be the first, if not as one of the first nations that Xi is going to, is Vietnam. Because I remember when Nike, I went and visited North Korea. I've been to North Korea, but I went to Vietnam. I went to the north of Vietnam. I went down to the south of Vietnam. And one of the things that happened along the way is Nike moved much of its manufacturing, I don't know what percentage of it, to Vietnam. And it's been a great relationship. And that happened years and years and years ago. And I think Vietnam signaled, when you see the countries that have reached out almost immediately, a place like Vietnam came and said, hey, we want to be first in line here to figure out how we do this. And, it's a smaller market for U.S. goods, but I think the dominoes will start to fall one at a time as these countries strike individual deals with the United States. Yeah,
well, Kevin Hassett said this morning on Mornings with Maria that, there are deals kind of ready to go from a whole host of countries. And really the big decision for the White House is, do you do them one by one? Do you do them all in sort of announce that we have deals with 6 countries? I think we are going to see tremendous progress. And by the way, you had a big announcement today about NVIDIA deciding to manufacture stem-to-stern products in the United States. I think we'll see more of that also, Jason. I mean, I have to say, nobody likes the disruption in the markets and all the turbulence. But I think what the president is doing, onshoring manufacturing, bringing home production to the United States, is totally possible. And the reason is twofold. One, cheap energy, which is right now a very big component of a lot of manufacturing and production analyses, if you will. We have abundant cheap energy, and most countries, particularly, for example, China, does not. So we are a favored nation in terms of energy supply. And the other thing is, historically, we've had very high labor rates compared to other countries. That hasn't really changed. What has changed is AI and robotics and the ability to manufacture with fewer workers. Well, that is too bad for labor, but the reality is you would still rather be manufacturing in the United States, even if technology reduces labor as a component, because you're creating wealth here in the United States.
Yeah.
Fewer workers, but, there's wealth being created, which benefits all Americans. So I'm not optimistic this happens tomorrow. I think it happens over the next 2 or 3 years. Joe Biden, after all, Democrats should be applauding this. He talked for years about onshoring manufacturing, bringing home. He just failed to do it. I think what Trump is doing is like a blunderbuss approach. It's uncomfortable, but I think it actually will pay dividends.
Yeah, I think, again, Democrats missed opportunity. You have video of Nancy Pelosi and Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer talking about this very topic. They could have politically taken the opportunity to say, see, I told you we should have been doing this a long time ago, but they would never do that. And it does cause a little disruption. But remember, you do it in the United States, then there are zero tariffs. In fact, you have another article out. Trump risks it all, takes on the world with tariffs, and puts America first. Let me play this clip. This is clip number 4. This is Kevin Hassett, National Economic Council Director on CNN.
Now, on the trade policy, the whole point of the trade policy is to address the national emergency that we're too dependent on foreign products in the U.S., especially if we were at a time of conflict. And we're doing something about that. And the Reciprocal Act was basically, guys, if you come to the table and negotiate with us and treat us the same way we treat you, then we'll get your rate really low. And so right now, 130 countries have responded, and we're negotiating with them, and they've got their rate down to 10%.
Amazing, right? But it is Donald Trump, America first, baby.
That's going to be very bad for the GOP in the midterms. It's going to be very bad for President Trump. But I think he is so convinced that this is the right thing to do for the country for 2 reasons. One, kind of the wealth impact that I talked about. Our companies have been really hurt by not being treated fairly on the world stage. No one talks about that, but that is a real problem for an awful lot of manufacturers, but also providers of services, et cetera, and their employees and their shareholders. The second thing is you can't fight a war if all you're doing is creating fine cuisine and movies, right? I mean, that is a reality. So there is really a national security issue here. If we don't make steel, we don't make aluminum, then we can't make tanks, we can't make ships. And by the way, we're not making many ships. This is something that Mike Waltz, National Security Advisor, is very hot on. And he's totally right. The Chinese are building gazillions of ships, commercial and warfare. We're not building but like 4 or 5 a year. So that all these things have to change. How do you change it, Jason? You just kick somebody and you kick the economy with a big, heavy boot and make it change. And it's not going to happen otherwise.
Yeah, the Democrats, they got the memo. Memo goes out. They all say the same thing. Let's listen to this montage, clip 6, of Democrats complaining about the chaotic tariff policy.
Yeah.
There is no tariff policy. It's just all chaos and corruption.
To the global chaos right now and unpredictability, his tariff strategy is wrong.
Look at what the chaos is doing. It is tanking our economy.
Yeah, of course, they don't offer any solutions themselves. They just want to call it chaos, and hopefully that sticks. That's the word of the moment.
Yeah, that's what they want to tell people. But worse than that, I mean, they really are. Look at the headlines of the last week. We're going to lose our reserve currency status. The United States is no longer going to be the dominant economy. I ask you, who else is taking our place? Right. Have you looked at Europe lately? Europe's a catastrophe. 2 of their biggest countries can't form a government that lasts more than 5 minutes. Germany's in the 3rd year of recession. I mean, if you go one by one, they have the problems that our country will have if we continue down the liberal thought processes and policies of Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden and all the rest. The green policies, labor rules that are just completely impossible have landed Europe in a really bad place. And thank God for Donald Trump, because we have cut those things off right now, and we're taking a very different tack. Is it risky? Yes. Could it pay enormous long-term dividends? I believe it really can.
No, I think you're right. I think Donald Trump is all in on it. I think he foreshadows it. I think the world is, you think we're worried and that the Democrats, there's chaos. Imagine if you're one of the other countries, you don't have access to the United States markets, right? There's another side of that coin. And look, Donald Trump, I'm convinced at the end of the day, he may take a while, but they're one at a time. We'll start to see that the United States has a better deal than they did than the day Donald Trump walked into office. And at the end, that's what ultimately I think the markets they're trying to see just tomorrow. But I think the overall economy will thrive under that scenario. Liz Peek, Fox News contributor, columnist for FoxNews.com and The Hill. Thank you so much for joining us on the Brian Kilmeade Show.
Hey, thank you very much for having me.
Thanks,
Have a great
Liz.
day.
She's the best. All right, stay with us. We got more. We'll be right back.
Radio that makes you think. This is the Brian Kilmeade Show.
Hey, I'm Jason Chaffetz filling in for Brian. He'll be back on Monday. One of the hardest working guys, television, radio. He is always on the go, always doing things. Hey, I want to just put in a quick plug for my podcast, Jason in the House. Fox News produces it. Anywhere you listen to a podcast, just type in Jason in the House. And you can find podcasts. And my podcasts come out once a week. A lot of profile stuff, a lot about the news and somebody doing something stupid somewhere. And one of them I did a while ago, it was probably a year ago, but is really insightful, is about our next guest, which is Griff Jenkins. You know Griff, he's everywhere. He's all over the world. It's always in a tumultuous place. Got a fascinating background. And if you go to my Jason in the House podcast, then you search for Griff Jenkins. You want to hear his story and how he got to Fox and how he made things happen at Fox. It's really fascinating. But Griff Jenkins, thanks for joining us on the Brian Kilmeade Show today.
Jason, it's great to be on. And, literally, I'm going to sound like a shill plugging for Jason in the House, but our viewers or listeners, if you haven't listened to Jason's podcast, you should, because what you do so well, Jason, is just have a conversation with the people that you see on our air. I mean, they've got me on a story every day as a reporter, from the border to, what's happening on Capitol Hill and the White House. And, you don't really see much about the people you see, but you're very good at just having a casual sort of conversation about where you're from. How'd you get your start? How'd you get there? And so I would encourage, it's a great podcast, and I would encourage everyone to tune in because, we live in this time and day and age now, maybe because of the advent of, reality programming on television and stuff some 10 years ago. But now people really want the authentic, real human side of the people they see every day. And you do a great job of bringing that out.
Hey, producers, let's make sure we give Griff some extra time on the show. That would be great. You can go on. You can keep going if you'd like, Griff. No, I'm just teasing. Thank you. I really do appreciate it. I think it was one of the better ones because you have an amazing story. You have a fun story. So in the spirit of Griff Jenkins Does Everything, I'm going to go around the horn. We're going to talk about a lot of different subjects because we have a few minutes, and that's what radio is all about. So I want to get your take first and foremost on a story, at least today, I just can't get over. I just cannot leave my brain. I just will always look at this person and think, Gretchen Whitmer, where are you? She goes into the Oval Office and holds that little binder in front of her face or little pamphlet or whatever it was, oh, we can't see you, Governor. Who might that be? I mean, it's the most childish thing I'd seen in the Oval Office, for goodness sake. What's your take on this, Griff?
Well, I mean, listen, so that photo, a little bit behind the scenes here, that photo was taken by, the press pool that's in there, right? So the still photographers, whether it's AP or Reuters or whatever, that shoots the still shots in the Oval Office and White House moments are really there to capture history. I mean, when
right.
Peter Doocy and Jackie Heinrich and reporters are in there, they're there to make news, get a soundbite, get Trump to say something. But the photographers are there to really capture moments in time that are historical. And what's crazy about that shot of Whitmer is everybody talked about Whitmer's the sleeper. Whitmer can win. Whitmer comes from a very battleground state that could have possibly made a difference in the election had she been chosen instead of Kamala Harris. And in fairness, we've all seen her. She's pretty good on a debate stage. She's a pretty polished politician. But yet that holding a binder in front of her face just flies in the face of why AOC and Bernie Sanders and this fight oligarchy tour. It's like the Grateful Dead show going around everywhere, drawing all the old hippies and some young people perhaps that want to, just stand up against everything Trump for no other reason than just to stand up against everything Trump, despite the success we're having at the border and in other areas. But it's just a contrast because really the Democrat Party that's just lost any sort of focused direction and certainly lack a message. I think it's really a damning photo for a potential future star of the Democrat Party to literally be trying to hide her face in the Oval Office when the few Democrats left in the base that really don't want to give up, despite being down 8 touchdowns, want to see Democrats just simply fight. And that message was not sent holding a binder in front of your face.
No, she was there supposedly to fight for the people of Michigan, of which she represents all of them. This is not an election, but whatever. It was just it's just a meme that just writes itself. I can't wait to see how many times that's used into the future. I saw just moments ago, the president of El Salvador is now having a meeting in the Oval Office, and which is great because they've been a great ally, a huge help. They have cracked down on crime and done a lot of things. But again, he's dressed up, but I'm still mystified why people can't wear a tie into the Oval Office at this point. I mean, it's a very trendy look. The president looks good, but he's not wearing a tie, and I don't know. Is that just me? Yeah. Am I too old school?
No, you're not, and I'm with you. I mean, look, Nayib Bukele is really a significant world leader right now because the White House, literally, as Bukele arrived at the White House, they put out a press release and a statement just moments ago saying, criminal aliens will not find safe harbor in the U.S. You'll be sent to places like CCOT in this historic agreement between Trump and Bukele to send the hardest of the hardest. And they list a whole slew of people that have been sent there, many Tren de Aragua gang members that have raped, assaulted, murdered, and it just carried out horrific crimes, which is why people wanted them to go. But I will say, even as you're a rising world leader on the biggest world stage in the White House with President Trump, you might want to pick up a few photo op tips from how it went for Zelensky and say, you know what, guys, let's pop a tie on, even though we normally don't do it down in El Salvador. Maybe it's just a good bet. So I'm with you on that.
Maybe I'm putting too much on the attire, but I think it goes to the respect of the Oval Office. Look, they're a great ally. The president is obviously very much in favor of what they're doing. They're doing a great help to the United States. Can't say enough about that. But President Trump is also one that wore a tie to, a UFC fight and brought his grandkids to Would you bring your grandkids to a UFC fight?
I mean, maybe. I've never gone. Have you been to one? Like we haven't. Go together and document it. I mean, it's like.
Do I have to wear a tie? I'm not going to wear a tie if that's okay with you.
No, we're not wearing ties to the UFC fight, but it really is. Just sort of stepping aside a little bit on that. I was watching over the weekend the kind of social media play that his appearance at that fight got, and the announcers for UFC he has, when the president comes in to these things, they play a Kid Rock song, right. and they're talking about this image of a president and the strength and the entrance with the rockin' Kid Rock fight song really captures all of the energy and adrenaline of when the top prize fighter comes in, but even more so because it's Trump and they're all cheering for him and they all love him and support what he's doing. And then you start looking around that arena and you know what they are? They're young people. And that really tells the story of how we went from, the most liberal voting bloc of young people traditionally for decades to now what appears to be just a massive shift with all of these Trump supporting, I don't know if they're fully conservative or not. They're certainly Republican if they voted for Trump, young voters. And this is how he's done it. It's a far cry from, Joe Biden fighting with the short stack of stairs, the back of Air Force One, to President Trump walking in with a fight song with everybody on their feet in the standing ovation. It wasn't like a championship. It was just Friday night UFC fight.
Yeah, look, it's all about authenticity, and this is not a made-for-television moment. Donald Trump's been going to fights like these and boxing matches for decades. I mean, Don King, his relationship with Don King, the boxing promoter, the relationship he has to UFC fighting is just that he's gone multiple times. This is not like, oh, hey, I bet the kids would love this. I'll show up. And but that and the enthusiasm, you're right, the welcoming, that's also authentic. And this is what I think the Democrats just have never fully understood. They somehow, you have this billionaire president who ascended to the presidency, but he appeals more to the working class, more to the working men and women of this country than anybody the Democrats can put up at this point.
Well, no, you're 100% right. And, what he's doing in these appearances with working class voters is he's meeting them where they are. Yeah. That's why he went to a barber shop in Brooklyn, and that's why he went where they are. And to be quite honest, with the virtue signaling woke policies that the Democrat Party really embraced in the last 4 years is what caused that rift between the Democrat Party and working class families. And as we watch this tariff thing play out, the theme you're really hearing is it's going to work. We'll find out. It's too early for anybody, honestly, to render a judgment because we don't know how it's going to turn out. But it does send the message that this is geared towards working class. This is Main Street, not Wall Street. I'm not worried about the hiccups and ups and downs and volatility on the market because ultimately the end goal is working class jobs, manufacturing back in the U.S., in meeting Main Street and putting them in the driver's seat. And it's going to be fascinating to see how it plays out.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, I'm going to shift gears on you, Griff, just a little bit. I'm going to Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, horrific event where the governor there, Josh Shapiro, he was going to celebrate Passover and posted up a picture on social media, but then the governor's mansion was attacked, and the images of the fire that was created were much more dramatic, much more real than I think the initial report gave credence to. Let's listen to Cut 12. This is Governor Josh Shapiro talking about what happened.
If he was trying to terrorize our family, our friends, the Jewish community who joined us for a Passover Seder in that room last night, hear me on this. We celebrated our faith last night proudly, and in a few hours we will celebrate our second Seder of Passover again proudly. No one will deter me or my family or any Pennsylvanian from celebrating their faith openly and proudly.
What's your take? They do have a suspect in custody, but what's your take on what happened there?
Jason, I'm glad you asked me, and I don't know Governor Shapiro, but I've gotten to know him a little bit from afar because a close friend and his wife went to college with Josh Shapiro and grew up with them. And back when, the campaign was going on, I was really getting a lot of insight as to sort of, was Josh Shapiro the rising star? And a lot of people still Monday morning quarterback and look back and say, 2020 hindsight, he really could have been a huge addition to the ticket. And part of the reason, apparently, in the considerations to looking at him was, because remember, he was a short list for Harris's pick, was that he set his Democrat label aside and was one of the only Democrat leaders that was, unequivocally critical and harsh on the protests, the anti-Semitic protests, those pro-Hamas protesters in Columbia and other college campuses. And he didn't pull any punches on that. And a lot of people surmise that cost him the consideration. But I do think, I was listening to him a little bit over the weekend, and he had another line where he simply said, I don't give a damn what party you're from, whether it's a Republican politician or a Democrat politician. Violence like this is never acceptable. And it's such an important point, and we are in an age when you've got an increased threat to politicians, and it was good to see that he used that moment to send sort of a national message and not just a Pennsylvania message. God forbid this happened when he and his family were asleep. And it could have gotten a lot worse. Thankfully, the first responders and everybody, handled it well. But I do think he's going to be. It'll be interesting to see if the Democrat Party embraces him. But I think he's a guy that they may want to really give a hard look at, because he does seem to be, as you mentioned, authenticity matters. He seems to be every bit authentic. And, he handled this moment about as well as any politician could, I think.
Yeah, no, it's sad that it happened. I think it was targeted based on the religion, and that should not be tolerated. And we need more voices on both sides of the aisle calling it out for what it is. Griff Jenkins, thank you so much. You're the best. You have such perspective and great. You're just always got a positive vibe. So I hope you get to go surfing soon. I know that's part of your passion. But thanks so much for joining us on the Brian Kilmeade Show.
Breaking news, unique opinions. Hear it all on the Brian Kilmeade Show.
Hey, this is Jason Chaffetz. Brian will be back tomorrow. Don't worry. He's coming back, and he'll be here before you know it. I want to talk very briefly here about the fentanyl tariff. Have you noticed this? Donald Trump talks about it. Almost no stories are written about it or mentioned it. But what is the fentanyl tariff? And why is that focused on China? I have a guess. I have a pretty good guess, actually. Peter Schweitzer, if you followed him along the way, he's one of the better investigative folks out there. I actually have a relationship with his Government Accountability Institute, which he runs. So full disclosure on that. But he wrote a book called Blood Money. Blood Money, it talks about some of the things that are going on. And one of the nefarious things that is alleged in this book is that the Chinese control a port in Mexico, and that there is this place, and it's named in this book, where there are Chinese nationals, and I think it's close to 2,000 of them, that are there operating. China is sending in the pill presses, the precursors, and they're actually making, this is the allegation, fentanyl and other illegal drugs. Some of them are fake pharmaceuticals, and then they're handing them over to the drug cartels for distribution. And the other end of the deal is that instead of having traditional efforts like Panama and others, part of what the Chinese negotiated was, hey, what we want to do is have the money laundered through China. They use Chinese apps, encryption, all kinds of things. You go to the border, talk to Border Patrol. It's out there. Look at this DEA report, which is out there in the public. We know that's happening, and I think the president knows that's happening, and I think the president is really trying to push the Chinese to say, hey, until you shut this down, until you get rid of it, you're going to have this tariff. How painful is that? I'm Jason Chaffetz, filling in for Brian Kilmeade. Thank you. Stay with us.